want to talk about the components of risk that make up the standard deviation of a portfolio. And this table here comes from a study that was done, you can read the footnote here, by Myers-Statman. And what he looked at was what was the standard deviation or the average standard deviation of portfolios with different numbers of securities in the portfolio. And you can see that when there's one stock in the portfolio, you have 49%, and if you have two stocks, it drops down to 37.36. Okay, 4 stocks, 29.69, etc. And what you notice is that once you get past 20 or 30 stocks, there's very little reduction in the standard deviation of the portfolio. I mean, look at the case. If you have 100 stocks in your portfolio, you have a standard deviation of 19.69. If you have 10 times that amount of stocks in your portfolio, 1,000, you get down only to 19.21% standard deviation. And let's just scroll down a little bit, and you can see that basically you get a graph that looks like this. As you increase the number of securities in your portfolio, the risk of the portfolio goes down, but it stops going down to a certain amount. Okay, it doesn't get any lower after a certain amount. Okay, and so what we do is we define risk, total risk here of the portfolio, as being made up of diversifiable risk and non-diversifiable risk. So what are we talking about here? We're basically saying that there is some risk you can get rid of. You can get rid of by adding stocks to your portfolio. And there's some risk you just can't get rid of no matter how many stocks are in your portfolio. And in fact, sometimes we refer to the diversifiable risk as firm specific. And that means that if something happens to that company, it affects that company's stock, but it doesn't affect everybody else. Okay? Before he passed away, Steve Jobs was such the visionary at Apple Computers that certainly his death would have been significant to Apple. How could you get rid of that? You could get rid of that risk by buying some stocks in different companies. Because when Steve Jobs passed away, okay, or had he passed away unexpectedly, he had been sick near the end. He had liver cancer and pancreatic cancer, actually, I believe, and also a liver transplant. So, you know, they knew he was sick, so the market sort of had adjusted. But if he had died suddenly, without warning, okay, that probably would have impacted Apple's stock significantly. How could you have gotten rid of the risk? By owning some General Electric, by owning some General Motors, by owning some Microsoft, okay, some Procter & Gamble, some different companies. The other kind, but there's some risk you can't get rid of. You can't diversify away. Okay, looking at this graph, this blue area, we refer to that as market risk. Okay, it's risk that the market faces, things that you can't get rid of. Interest rates going up. Well, that affects everybody. It affects different companies differently, but it affects every company. Okay, the tragedy of 9/11 affected all companies. Some companies may have benefited. Security companies may have benefited from this terrible tragedy, but it affected everybody. It was risk you couldn't get rid of, okay, by owning stocks in different companies. So some risk you can get rid of, some risk you can't get rid of, okay? We also have other names for these things. Lots of times this is called non-systematic risk, the firm specific. Okay, it's not part of the system. So you can see a lot of things for the same name. And this is referred to as systematic risk. Okay, it's part of the system. And in finance, we make an argument that we should only reward risk you can't get rid of. Okay, risk should be rewarded, and it should be rewarded with higher expected return Okay, you have to get something for taking the risk. But it should only be risk you can't get rid of. Okay, because if you could get rid of it, we shouldn't reward you for taking it. I mean, think about some examples in real life. Suppose your instructor gives you an extra credit assignment to do at the beginning of the semester. You've decided not to do that assignment. At the end of the semester, you've accepted the risk of a lower grade by not having those extra points. You can't go to the professor now and say, gee, could I do the extra credit assignment now? You've accepted the risk. If, for example, I choose not to buy life insurance, if I pass away, okay, I leave my family perhaps with not enough assets to keep the house and, to pay for my children's college education, okay, I've accepted that risk, okay. They wind up bearing it because if it's life insurance, I'll be gone. If you choose not to buy homeowners insurance and your house burns down, well, people will feel bad for you, but you could have bought the insurance to protect yourself. So we don't want to reward you for taking risk you can get rid of. And in another tutorial, I will show you how we actually compute systematic or market risk and a model known as the capital asset pricing model that we use to actually relate expected return to risk.